Hi, everyone. Welcome to the FDA Alumni Association webinar for communicators. We're going to just wait a moment because people are still joining. So hang tight just for a moment. All right, I'm very impatient, so we're done. People will join us along the way. Hi, I am Elisa Bernstein. I am president of Bernstein RX Solutions. I was FDA. I was at FDA for 31 years, so I am now working with the FDA Alumni Association on putting together this webinar series. This is the Next Step webinar series, so thanks for joining us. This one is focused on communicators, and we're focusing our webinars on transitional folks particularly, but whether you're at FDA now, whether you're in transition, or whether you just left, for whatever reason, this is a great place to be. We are recording this, so just so you know, and I am going to step back and hand it over to this wonderful panel. And first, thank them in advance for coming, and they're going to introduce themselves. So here you go.
All right. Well, I think I'm to start on introducing myself. I'm Bob Barich. I'm with CNR Search. We specialize in communications positions, and I'm coming at this from a search perspective, and I'm here to help in any way possible in helping in either, individuals in trying to navigate, their transition period.
Thanks, Bob. Hi, everyone. I'm Virginia Cox. I am a former Associate Commissioner of the Office of External Affairs at FDA. I also worked for FDA in the 90s, kind of aging myself here. And I worked in the Commissioner's Office. And I also worked at HHS for about a decade before that. Now I am doing consulting. I am a lawyer by training, but I have, based on what I just said, worked most of my career in government. And after leaving FDA, I transitioned to consulting. So we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Julie, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Virginia. Hi, everyone. I so wish we could see you. I wish I knew who was out there because we'll probably know a lot of you and have worked with many of you. It's so nice to be here today with you and with my colleagues here on screen. I'm Julie Zawisza, and I spent 15 years at FDA in 6 different jobs. I started in CBER, went to the Commissioner's Office, went to CEDAR, went to what used to be Global Regulatory Ops. Then I had a short stint in CDRH. So I was around for quite a bit, and it was the best and worst of times, but mostly the best of times. So I'm so happy to be here today, and I hope we have a very fruitful and helpful discussion for you ahead. And we'll turn it over to our moderator, Erica.
And I'm Erica Jefferson. I think I'm the only one on the call that has had both Virginia and Julie's former jobs at FDA. I did 2 tours, most recently as the head of external affairs. And during tour 1, I was the head of the Office of Media Affairs. But I've also spent time at a communications agency. I also worked at the American Pharmacists Association, and I've had senior communications roles at companies like Recode, Elector, Dermira, Pharmacyclics, and Genentech. So those names will probably be familiar to some of you. But good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for what we hope will be a helpful and enlightening discussion. I want to thank Elisa, the FDA Alumni Association leadership team, and the Communications and Activities Committee for hosting this panel for our FDA communications colleagues who've been impacted by the recent cuts at the agency. They could not have assembled a better group of people to share their perspectives on life after FDA. As Julie alluded to, we know that this has been a really challenging time, but one thing I've always appreciated about the FDA Alumni Collective is we know how to rally support around our colleagues. So without further ado, Virginia, Julie, and Bob, let's get started. So we're about a month or so removed from many of the communicators at the agency being notified that they were being separated from government service. What advice do you have for people who still may be struggling to process the news? Julie, why don't we start with you?
Well, this is, obviously my perspective. I feel like working for FDA can be deeply personal. And many of us who've left, I think Erica sort of touched on this, we do empathize with what you're going through. We may not completely, understand everything you've been going through, but we do care and we want to help in any way we can. Again, that's why I'm so glad to be here. But I feel like for those of you who are still struggling, could be many of you, I'm not going to tell you how to feel or to say time to move on, because I think, it's different for each person, right? For me, if I had been in your shoes, I would have been devastated, honestly. And I know I'd feel the loss, almost like, I don't know, like a bad breakup or a divorce or a death even. And I would need some time to get grounded, honestly, and feel ready to make a plan. And I think, it's hard to leave a job anyway, even when you know you're ready. And if you like or love a job and you feel like it was the one you were meant to do, I think it's especially hard to leave when it's not on your own terms, right? And you didn't have time to make a plan. So I think we have to acknowledge that for everyone. And maybe for some of you, even though you know better, you might feel like people think it was your fault. I mean, all of us here can say we assure you it was not your fault. I don't know anyone who thinks it's your fault, but sometimes I think that, that can be one of those mind things, and you have to try to put that away. In the corporate world, I guess I'm in my 9th year at Merck. I forgot to mention Merck, and I also had a job before Merck, and then I had other corporate jobs. So I can say in the corporate world for about 15 years working in it, that the decisions to separate staff, can be downsizing, mergers, acquisitions. It can be new leadership that wants to go a different way. It can be the economy. We're seeing that in my company and across the industry now. These are not failures of any individuals, right? They're depersonalized decisions. This may sound harsh, but people say, well, it's just business. And it often is. And as I said, it's happened to me. I've gone through this. I remember feeling panicky. I remember feeling a lot of anxiety. And sometimes reorgs or terminations are done very well. Sometimes they're not. But either way, they're still really hard. So, what I would say is, it's okay to allow yourself to grieve or feel whatever emotions you have, but at the same time, I think this is important. You have to make space in your head. Maybe many of you already are here, so I don't want to tell you something you already know, but I think you have to make space in your head and your heart, literally in your day, for the next steps to find employment, because honestly, you don't want to give up your energy. You don't want to give your energy, your power, for that matter, to something or somebody in the past, right? You want to direct your energy forward. You want to use it for something positive for you and your family, finding a new job. And I'm sure many of you know it likely will take a lot of energy to find your next job. So don't give that energy away to something that's now behind you. If you can, try to direct your energy forward. I think this shift is very important. And I hope that doesn't sound like a lecture or something, but that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Virginia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Julie, that was fantastic advice. I think one thing I want everyone to remember who's on this call is that you are incredibly valuable and you have great skills. Having worked in lots of different government positions, I can tell you my time at the FDA was probably the most interesting, the most demanding, and the most enjoyable part of my career. And now working with so many of the regulated industries, they don't really understand FDA. And I say that because you really are valuable. And I don't want you to think that industry may be your only option, because there's tons of other options out there for you. The other thing that I will say is that everybody needs communication support. So whether you're, looking solely in kind of that FDA field or beyond, I really want you to think about that. There's really not an organization, whether it's an NGO or industry or academia, that doesn't need communication support. So there's a lot of options out there. I also just want to add that I am here and available to help with anything that anybody needs. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime.
And I'll just quickly add, be patient and do allow yourself the time and the space to grieve. We all recognize on this call that government service is a calling. And up until recently, most of us were able to dictate when we wanted to end our time at FDA. I think it's important for you to recognize, as Julie and Virginia have pointed out, this is not your fault. But giving yourself time to reflect on what's happened will absolutely help prepare you for what's next. And there is life after FDA. All of us are here to tell you that. So I know many of you are anxious to hear from us on how you should be approaching your next job search. So why don't we jump right into that? Bob, why don't I start with you? You've been recruiting communicators for various organizations for 20+ years. In a competitive market like this, what can communicators do to stand out? And I should point out that Bob actually has placed me at 2 separate companies.
Thank you, Erica. So I'm going to go back a little bit to the first question, like how do you start the process? The shock hits you and you're now unemployed. And this isn't coming from my own personal experience, but it's coming from more what I try to counsel individuals on is, one, take a deep breath, sit down and understand that your mental health is your number one thing you must protect in this process. So what do I mean by that? You need to start like organizing yourself on how do you want to go about a job search? Who do you reach out to? Who do how much time in a day are you going to put into this? I think the mistake that people do is some people will delay it, and that's a mistake. Like it's not too soon to get started right away. And other people can like come shooting out of the blocks like crazy, like a racehorse, and then they'll tire. This could be a longer haul than one expects. And there's only a certain amount of days and a certain amount of hours in a day that you can do this, even if at your best. So I think, you sit down, you start to organize your, what time of day, how much in the day you want to do this. 3 to 4 hours should be your max. And then you start to organize your search, start to pull together resource, like who do you know out there that you can network with? And then ideally, what companies are your target companies? Just in dreamland, it's kind of like designing a kitchen or a house. You start pulling out magazine pieces and making a whiteboard. So, you try to target, what companies, what people and then you start to look in those companies to who you may know within those companies, and then start tracking the job boards, and then start to notice what type of positions you're attracted to. And this is going to be important information, even if you're not formally in a search, but this will help set the stage for you to see where you're gravitating to. So if you call an Erica, you call a Virginia, you call a Julie, you're coming at it from a perspective now like, oh, a little bit more information, and this is what I'm seeing from myself. So Erica, I don't know if that answers it, and if it doesn't, feel free to probe me on that.
No, that's very helpful, Bob. Julie, you left the agency a while ago. How did you go about determining what you wanted to do after FDA?
So I did have the luxury of being at FDA when I realized that I wanted to start looking. So I didn't have the same kind of pressures, and time constraints that maybe many of you are under. But what I did is I started thinking about, okay, what do I really like to do, in terms of what I'm doing now? What do I like to do, or what do I like to do that I haven't been able to do at FDA? And thought about what more my strengths were. And I tried to think about what I might be good at doing outside of FDA. And I tried to imagine what kind of entity might need someone like me, the things that I had done, the things I liked doing, the things that I felt I did well. And of course, I had the communications experience from FDA. I also worked for a PR agency and did some other things. But I ended up really liking the idea of working in regulatory policy, which at FDA did not appeal to me, frankly. It seemed like Federal Register notices, citizens petitions, sort of like, I don't know, really routine and dry, if you will, important, but not my space. But then what I, appreciated is that I really love the issues that we all have worked on while at FDA. They're fascinating, they're complex, they're ambiguous, they're controversial. There are a lot of no wins. You can't use your best judgment, but you're not always sure if you're right. The way you think about something, the way you communicate it. But I actually felt like that was my space. And so because of that, I intentionally started looking not so much for comms jobs, although I did look at some and I did an interview for some. And like Bob said, that starts helping you refine what you want. When you take the time to do the research, put in the effort to put those, tailored resumes in, land some interviews, and then it's like, oh, this isn't quite right. And it started feeling like regulatory policy might be the right place for me. So then I started thinking, well, where's a logical place to do regulatory policy? Well, regulated industry. So it wasn't my absolute go-to at the beginning. I kept it pretty open, even, like international health and NGOs, that kind of thing. But my whole career has been in health in many shapes and forms, nonprofit, clinical, NIH, device industry, PR agency, as I said, FDA, so on. So I had a lot behind me that I felt like I kind of built on. And it helped me see really, at that point in my life, this was 10 years ago, where do I want to go? And it, led me to industry. I only say that because I think you can use that process yourself to, as a sort of a self-inventory, and you can use it to illustrate to your recruiters or to the hiring official, the progression in your career and how your experience deepens and expands over time. Even if you were only at FDA your whole career, I bet you didn't do the same job for every, year or even every month. And you can emphasize that to a recruiter or hiring official, the things that you've done and how your career has expanded and grown. And even honestly, even if you were in the same job, I'll bet you still didn't do it the same way. You either were better at it, more efficient, maybe you went up through the lines of management. And if you look and have the time to look at, well, how many skills do I have that I have developed and refined over the years, and which ones would be useful to a new employer, like Bob said, like the ones you're targeting. I think, you look at your natural strengths that play to your interests, and then you look at the skills you've learned on the job, and every single one of them counts. And do not be modest about your accomplishments when you talk to potential employers, because like Virginia said, you all are in an elite group of communication professionals who have dealt with, and designed programs where you've educated, you messaged, I would say, even looking back, and I work for a pharmaceutical company and we have some hard times too, but I mean, I think the work that you did at FDA and that I did, all of us, you deal with some of the most scientifically and technically and clinically complex and controversial issues anyone can imagine in our field, right? And at times under enormous pressure, almost always under resource constraints. And you know what? This gives you an edge. I was talking to one of our corporate comms people at Merck a few weeks ago, and she said to me, what we need in our industry and in our company is communications people who can do strategy and who can manage complex issues and who can develop messaging that's not simply about launching a new product or, and promoting our brand. That's what we need. We need people like all of you who have done that deeper work. So here's why I think FDA people have a great advantage. You learn an issue quickly, you dissect it. You have to synthesize all these points of view. You have to simplify it for multiple audiences. You have to repackage. You guys are doing this every day. And you're doing it in an environment where people don't always agree either on the science or what does the science mean or what do we tell the public, when do we tell them? All that I think you can emphasize as your skill set and more when you speak to potential employers.
Thanks, Julie. Virginia, as you alluded to during your introduction, you've had a really interesting professional journey as well. How did you decide to leverage your experiences in government into the private sector?
Yeah, I mean, like Julie, I had the advantage of being at the FDA when I was making a decision to leave, and quite honestly, that decision was just based on personal things that were going on with my family and just changes that were happening. So otherwise, would probably have been on the riff with many of you. So, it's a journey that you go through. And I just want to emphasize a couple of points that Julie made and then talk about how I made my decision. I really think it's important that you are honest with yourselves about what you want to do and not I know it feels very panicky, but like take the time to really sit down and say, what do I want to do? What am I good at? And maybe I'm good at it, but I just don't want to do that anymore. And those are some of the things that I went through. I knew that I didn't want to deal with the media anymore. So, and I knew what I really liked doing, which was kind of big issues, policy stuff, problem solving. I love the data. I like the science a lot. And so when like Julie, I interviewed for a lot of kind of corporate comms jobs, which are also fantastic. But like I said, I wanted to move away from the media piece. So the consulting job just really fit my needs at the time. And I have to say what I do now really fits what I love to do, which is kind of these big projects. Some of my projects last 2 years, some last 6 years, some last 6 months. But I go in and I really get to dive in deep on the things that are interesting to me and provide a lot of value, I think, to clients, mostly industry, but not always. And it really just at the end of the day matched when I put things down on paper, what I wanted to do. I couldn't have described the job that I wanted, but I could have described the types of things from a day-to-day perspective that I really enjoyed doing. And I know it might not feel right now that you have that time or luxury, but I just can't emphasize enough how valuable your skill sets are and how much I interact with people all the time and they don't have the skill sets that you have. I know I don't know many of you because I have been gone from the agency for a while, but you have the same skill sets that so many people that I worked with had there. So you will find something great and just try to really be true to yourself and what it is that you want to do.
So I want to make sure that folks know that they can ask us questions. Please use the Q&A feature that's on the lower bar of your screen. We do have our first question. How would you advise talking to prospective employers about being RIF'd? Bob, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious what, the situation that's happened in the country and, with the FDA. So I don't think there's anything there that you need to worry about from a perspective of people not understanding. I think, the reality is some people are probably, some recruiters may be looking for you because they know you're RIF'd. So make sure that you put on LinkedIn, you're open to work, and make sure you're visible out there so people can find you. I don't think you need to worry about explaining that you've been RIF'd under these conditions.
Julie, any thoughts?
I completely agree. I think I was terminated from my first job after FDA because of a merger acquisition. And in no way did that hinder my ability to interview for other jobs. The interviewers understood immediately the situation. When your company is acquired, there are two people in the same job. When you're RIF'd from a government job or even from a company, and we're going to be losing 6,000 people at Merck. People in the industry and recruiters understand that these decisions are business decisions, right? Or these are made because you have a new leadership team. It doesn't get down to the individual level of there's something that about you that caused you to RIF. No, these are, decisions made in the aggregate, and the people on the outside who will be trying to find you, as Bob said, and happy that we have this pool of candidates that are so amazing. They understand that. I would not worry about that at all, honestly.
I agree with Julie. Having just managed through this at my former company, I will say that we've emphasized to folks this was a business-driven decision. It had it was in no way a reflection on the employees' performance. So I think that that's important. We have another question from a familiar face here, so just bear with me as I read it. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all, and thanks for hosting this helpful session. I'm finding that many opportunities are coming to me with the focus on leveraging my FDA experience and network, but when I get on the phone with hiring managers, I've seen hesitancy because I don't have the corporate communications in-house pharma background already established. What I bring to the table is unique. I'm also having trouble distancing myself from the OMA and Media Relations Director title, and I'm wondering how the former OMA OMAers here showcased broad strategic communication skills and industry engagement experiences that OMA FDA alums bring. Finally, thoughts on pursuing consulting opportunities versus in-house. So why don't we start with Julie, since she headed up OMA.
I was going to say, start with Bob, because he's the one you have to
Yeah, we'll come back
convince,
to
right?
Bob. Yeah.
That you have transferable skills. Yeah, I think you do have to look at your communication skills as eminently, completely transferable. You have to paint a picture for employees, and to some extent on your resume, but certainly during the interview process, of how the things you've done are transferable. And they are. You can talk to any audience. You can tailor a message for anyone. If you, as Virginia said, working with media is a specialized skill set, of course, just like anything else, crisis comms or consumer education, public health campaigns. These things are specialized, but you can step back, a step or two, and think more broadly about how the things that you know how to do, you can do anywhere. Yes, there'll be a learning curve going into any new organization. If it's industry, I mean, I went into a large pharmaceutical company, and I've never reviewed a BLA or an NDA or anything at all, right? And I work in policy, so I have to get deeper now than I did in comms. And we had to get pretty deep in comms, and many of you have had to do that as well. You have to be like a helicopter, up and down, up and down. And you learn how to do it. I mean, you just do it. You have enough, you have the experience, and you give yourself credit for what you can learn on the job, but you have to be able to sell yourself first, and then you can learn those things. Someone told me, who went to business school at Boston College, she learned, kind of funny, it was a long time ago, but she said what she learned from her professors is that when men interview for jobs, a lot of confidence, and they're like, I can do this, even if they maybe can't do it, I can learn it. Women go in and they say, I haven't done this, I'm not sure, can I learn it? Don't do any of that. If you're a man or a woman, don't do that. Say, I can learn it in your head. I can learn it. That's what I think. It takes some work, though. You have to do the self-reflection, the inventory that Bob's talking about. You really have to know what you want to do. And I think if you start struggling with, like, how do I sell myself? It may not be the right job. I think it shouldn't be that hard to tell people what you do and how you can do it for them, and try to, think of it as sort of it's a challenge to persuade, right? In communications, we learn the art of selling an idea. We sell a point of view. We sell a position. That's what you do.
So there's a lot to unpack with this one. And I think that there's a couple of, and I'm going to be kind of all over the place here. First off, unfortunately, the job interview, when the way the companies go about job interviews is to eliminate candidates, not to actually hire. They look for the things to eliminate you instead of bring you in 9 out of 10 times. So when you go in with that mindset, you have to understand that you have to, like, look at it before you go into the interview, like, okay, where are they going to be poking holes at me on, and be ready to counter that. The other thing is, this is where I come in on a candidate. Like, I talk to a lot of candidates. They'll say, well, that job isn't right for me. I don't want to go on the interview, or I'm not going to do the interview. Let me tell you, every interview is a learning process. And anytime you can get an interview, you take that interview, because it helps you hone your skills. And it's critical to go to take as many interviews. So if somebody says they want to talk to you, you talk to them. So, those are, and the other thing is, understand, don't be hard on yourself. It's a very competitive job market out there. So yeah, you may go there. Like, from a recruiting standpoint, we get calls from companies. They say they want somebody who is got reputation, for instance, right? And then I bring them a media person. Okay. I can be in a meeting pitching it to Erica, like, well, this candidate's got great reputation experience, but there's just going to be times that they just don't want to hear it. They don't believe it because you're a media person, or they perceive you to be a media person. So what do you do in these circumstances? You try to make you try to have several different resumes, broader resumes, try to take off. Like, if you're a media person, you don't want to call out head of media, even, or if you are calling out head of media, put bullets of everything else that you've done under it. And if it's a media job, definitely call out head of media and all the media things you do under it. And so, but understand that it's not, the interview is more important than if you get it. And I know that sounds crazy, but you're going to learn something every time you interview. And some jobs are just not meant to be had. But if they're willing to talk to you, then you talk to them and then you sell yourself on all the points. But don't be disappointed if they don't hear you.
And I would just add, as someone who left the agency the first time, having come directly from the Office of Media Affairs, I always viewed it as a positive. FDA, as we've all pointed out, the roles there are unique. So your job wasn't just to talk to the media. It was often to develop the communications plan for that announcement, to develop all of the messaging, to write the press release, to prep the spokesperson for that particular topic. And so I think to Bob's point, make sure you're pulling in all of the different things that you had to do to help prepare the agency, the center, for that announcement before you even got on the phone with a reporter. So make sure you don't limit yourself to just the media person. Make sure you point out the fact that you're an all-around communication strategist that can do media.
And
Agree. I mean, you've probably all sat in rooms where people have had some pretty heated, excitable type discussions, or even outright arguments about data and what it means and how to talk about it and how not to talk about it. And you have to navigate through that and find a place where you can write a message, and you might have to use negotiation or ambassador type skills to do that. You also have to defend what you're writing, because sometimes people don't understand that the audience you're writing for is not going to get that gobbledygook that they were just talking about an hour ago. All that stuff counts. Like Erica said, all those things count way beyond, which particular job did you have. It's those skills you used to produce a product and that process that you went through to produce that product that
So
counts.
we've got some questions stacking up in the Q&A, so I'm going to ask my co-panelists to zoom through their answers as quickly as possible so we can get to as many folks as possible. So our next question from the chat is, do you have any advice about building a resume in this current environment? It seems every recruiter is asking for a different format these days: too short, too long, ATS friendly, AI screening, etc. If you have any advice about how much time a person should spend on their resume at this time, that would be helpful. Bob, let's start with you.
personally, I don't use resume. A resume is pretty much not, it's not that important to me. What I'm looking for is longevity, job, a couple of job points, but that doesn't mean that's not the way the world operates. So I think it's interesting because this conversation has come up now, where we can take resumes and put them through AI, and it will tell us if the candidate compare candidates against one another. And now we're learning to do this for our clients. Like, okay, here's a resume, you plug it in. And the conversation's gone back to, and I don't know the answer 100% to this, but it went back to like, oh my God, everyone is going to have to go back to a long form resume where you include everything, because what's happening is these resumes are going into some AI bots that are these companies have that can evaluate your background to before like that's how they narrow you down before they even look at the resume. So the world is changing in front of us. I can tell you, you do have to have several different resumes, and I think I'm leaning towards now putting in a little bit more, or definitely target the job, the position description that you're looking at. And there's another, we looked over some questions. I don't know if we're going to get to it, but if you're applying to a role and you see a role you want, you better pay attention to your resume and target it towards that role. If you're just applying to one, I don't know, we'll see what happens, go with the long form and see, and let the AI bots have at it. But if you see the job that in your mind is your job, tailor your resume to that.
Let's take another question from the chat. What do you advise when the feedback that you've received is you are overqualified when you have an interest in a particular role, even if that role is different from a previous role? Why don't we start with you, Virginia?
Well, first I would ask if you want the job. So, if somebody tells you you're overqualified and you you still want that job, then you just need to convince them why this job, one, fits your skill set and maybe what's going on in your life at the time. So if someone were to tell me that I'm overqualified for a job that I would want, I would tell them exactly why I'm the perfect candidate. So, you know, kind of even going back to the last or the two questions before, don't be afraid to oversell yourself. I know it's hard. I have a hard time doing that. But don't be afraid to do that. It's your opportunity when you're in front of someone to tell them, to convince them. You have an audience for a few minutes, so use that to your advantage. Don't hold back. And if you really want the job, I mean, you have to be honest with yourself. If you think you are overqualified and this is not going to be a good job for you, then maybe move on.
Yeah. Another thing, overqualified covers a lot of territory, okay? Being on the recruiting side, I sometimes will call Erica, and this is role play because Erica, this has not happened, but Erica could be a hiring manager. Julie, Virginia could be hiring manager. I say, what's wrong? Well, the candidate's got too much of this and that. And, and then as a recruiter, you're not wanting to get into every detail of why it's not right, but you'll say, oh, you're overqualified for the role.
Yeah.
And so you just have to, kind of go with the role, with the punches on that. And I often tell candidates, like, if I was going for a recruiter job and I could do the job with my eyes closed, but I'm going to be considered overqualified for that job. And there's a lot of things that go into that overqualified statement that we can't get into right here. But understand that, sometimes overqualified is saying, nice way of saying they're not interested and they don't want to go into all the particulars. And then there could be other implications on that, but don't get bogged down on it. Just move on. And like Virginia says, if you want it over, you can go back and probe a little bit, but I would just take it and move on.
Another question from the chat. Do you have any advice to give to an editor writer who doesn't have a lot of comms, PR, social media experience? Many job opportunities seem to want someone who does everything related to content. Julie?
I mean, I think it does go back to your transferable skills to some extent. And also, if you were only in a writing position in FDA, what did you do before that? Are there other things you can draw from? Or even if you have volunteer activities or extracurricular things you do in the community or church or wherever it is, are there other things that you could add to build onto your skill set, incredibly? Because sometimes, and it kind of goes back to what Bob said, though, too, in Virginia, if you really want that job, then you have to take the time to think about, how do I say to them, yes, I was a writer, however, and then you broaden it out. And you also have to, I think, be honest with yourself. Do I want that job if it's not a writing job? Because you owe it to yourself, to do that. I think to make sure you want to put the energy into a position that either is not your skill set or not your space. If it's not your skill set or space and you want to expand to it, then you do have to do some work to persuade and to show that you can do more. And if you have other things you can point to and draw into that discussion, I think it makes for a stronger case to make.
And for the person who asked that question, I've seen success for folks who have that background applying for speech writing positions within organizations, as well as internal communications roles. Because I've always placed a high value on strong writers, especially for communications to employees within organizations. Executives need strong writers as well, because they're not always the best communicators with their team. So broaden your search a little bit would be my advice, and look for roles that allow you to be more inwardly focused, because you'll find a greater appreciation for your skill set in those types of situations. Bob, did you want to?
Also if you're just applying for the role, you know, that's fine. But if you actually get a call back, then there is some interest there. They've seen something. So now be ready for that. So, you know, there's a difference. Yes. If you see that on the job description, it actually says this and this, and you go, well, should I apply? Shouldn't I apply? And you apply, well, that's okay. That's okay. But if they actually call you back, there's something there that they see. And don't be afraid to ask, what did you see in my resume that interested you in my background? And do that early on in the process, you know, incorporate that in, like how excited you are, and you know what, you know, and try to weave that into your story, because that's going to give you a launching point from there on what they're actually seeing and what you may be able to contribute.
Yeah, I'll just add just real quickly, you know, you probably have a lot of other skills besides just writing, right? And think about that. You probably
Right.
worked within a team. You probably had to analyze and synthesize a lot of information. You know, there's a lot of skill sets that go into that that you can sell about all the things that you do as a writer. And to Erica's point, there's just not enough good writers out there. So think about all the other skill sets you have and try to sell those as well.
I just want to say quickly too, I use my communications background every day in a regulatory policy job. You know, it's essential that we can brief people, that we can write summaries, that we can distill information, you know, quickly or on the spot. And we have to be able to talk to people who are very, very busy, you know, and give them something quick that resonates. And I think anybody who works in communications has a skill set that is needed in any job at all. Okay, maybe not doing a protein assay or working with mice, but almost every job needs people with the skills that you have. So don't discount the skills that you have as a writer or as a campaigner or as a media relations person. There's a lot behind that. You just have to pull it out.
So we also have another question from the chat that folks have been applying for a number of jobs and they're not getting interviews. So Bob, do you have any tips for getting an interview and getting your foot in the door?
Yeah, this is where it gets tricky. And a couple of things, like what I would recommend is, one, go on LinkedIn, look up who's doing the hiring, and you know, try to go out and reach out to that person directly, send them a connect to invite and say, hey, just FYI, I've applied for your role. You know, just, I would love the opportunity. You could do a little bit of a sales pitch at that time. Also go into the company, see if there's anyone you know that's that is in the you know, that might be able, that you might know in the company. So look for any common connection. Here's the depressing part of this is, like, the job market is rough right now. Okay, so even for us as external recruiters, it's hard to get jobs, to get openings for them to work on. The internal recruiters want to work on the roles. And you know what we see now is that people, there's so many applications for an opening. And so, like, if I call Eric and she says, oh, Bob, you know, our HR team won't let us use you to do the search because we've got so many applications. You know, I point blank say, if I post a job, I'm going to have 200 applications too. So you know, that's the bad news, is that there's just too many candidates out there, and you know, you need to find a way in. And I've even heard from hiring managers, believe it or not, like, they don't want to post jobs now. They'll come to me because they don't want to get inundated with their friends
Yeah.
and have to say no. So it's a very strange time out there. So to answer the question, it's frustrating. It's just the way, you know, it is. But the best shot you got is go to the hiring manager, go to people you know who know the hiring manager, and press them to make the introduction.
I've given this challenge to interns who've worked for me in the past. While I'm a late adopter to LinkedIn, I've certainly taken to the platform. If you see someone that any of us on the call are connected to, don't hesitate to reach out and let us know that you're also interested in a role there, because as I said at the outset of the call, we're always happy to try and support and assist our fellow alum in any way that we can. So if there's something that we can be of assistance to, don't hesitate to see who we know that might be working at one of these organizations that can just help you get your foot in the door. So if someone happens to get an interview, how should they go about preparing for that? Why don't we start with you, Virginia?
Yeah, so, prepare for it like you would anything, like you would prepare for a meeting. Make sure you know who you're meeting with. So pay attention to who is your interviewer. Do some background on that person. We always say, first thing, know your audience, right? Who is that person? What is their background? What might they be interested in? Where did they come from? Do you have any commonalities that you can point out? There's always great to try to build a connection, make a connection. So first thing, know your audience, know who you're meeting with and everything you possibly can about that person. Then start scoping out the messages that you want to deliver. It's just like anything we would do in preparing for something. What is it that you want to make sure you leave them with? What are your key strengths? What are the things that they need to remember in that interview? They're going to ask you a lot of questions. You can prepare for them. Have a friend ask you questions. If you get nervous during interviews, have someone sit down and role play. We know the general types of questions, right? And it's always the general ones. Same with media, right? So anything else to add, right? It's those general questions that can kind of get you. So think about, yeah, what else do I want to add? How am I going to sell this person on my job? So make sure you prepare. And then also, if you have questions for them, it's not just a one-way street. Don't make it seem like or think that they're interviewing you. You are interviewing them too. And so they also want to see that you've come prepared, and they might ask you if you have questions. So come with questions as well.
Let me interject on that because I've seen that go sideways sometimes. So I always tell my candidates it's the dating process and you want them to ask you out and then you want to be able to say no. So just be careful because sometimes when candidates start interviewing back the hiring teams too early in the process, they take that the wrong way. And it is a two-way. Everything Virginia says is 100% true. But your goal is to get to the end of the game. And I tell candidates to save those hard questions for when you know you're going to get the job. Because sometimes and I'm not saying it's right, but the hiring managers will come back, well, they didn't seem that interested. They asked this and that. And it's like the more enthusiasm you have, the more positive you are about that, and you convince them that you want that job, especially in the first round of interviews, you may leave the interview and go like, oh God, I wouldn't take that job if they threw it at me. But
Yeah.
at least you're in a position then to say no. And in this job market, I would just say there's different levels of the job. And the first round of interviews, you got to know who you're talking to. You need the common bond. You need to create chemistry. You need them to like you so that they want to work with you. And in that process, you start saving up your questions and then you come back at them, I believe, later. And that's just my opinion. And
No, Bob, I agree with you. I think, what I was saying is oftentimes in an interview, and you may know this more than I do, but they may ask you if you have any questions, particularly towards the end of the interview.
Yeah.
So to Bob's point, you want to be pretty strategic about that. I think that's really good advice. You don't want to ask kind of okay, what are my benefits? What's my ability to get promoted? You don't want to ask those questions right there, but I think you should have a question ready to seem engaged, to seem like you've prepared. The other thing that I will add is that if you don't get the job, but you do go through an interview, follow up with that person and get feedback.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they'd be very happy to do that, and the feedback can be really helpful to you in your next interview. So don't be afraid to ask questions like, why, could you give me feedback? That's always going to be really valuable to you.
And to
I
the
think
extent that it's
another
possible,
good
I was
point.
just going to say, approach it as conversational. as possible in an effort to try and connect with the person that's interviewing you. And my last piece of advice, because I've seen this kill candidates, always follow up with a thank you. It seems so simple, it seems so routine, but so many people have not done that. And that's been the difference between one person getting the job and someone else not getting the job. Because when it's two very closely matched candidates, we really start nitpicking to see the differences between the two. And so something as simple as that can, get you across the finish line or sink your ship. Sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
Well, I just forgot what I was going to, but because you distracted me on the thank you notes. Be careful on thank you notes. Thank you notes are critical, but keep them short and
Short,
sweet.
yes,
I
absolutely.
cannot, one year we lost 5 offers due to thank you notes with spelling mistakes in them, okay? So
That part.
people try to get too complicated and fancy on spelling, on thank you notes. So just be really succinct and quick. And the other thing is, if you haven't looked for a job and you're a little bit old school, you'll go like, oh, I'm going to send a handwritten thank you note. No. By the time the handwritten thank you, you can do that, but I have lost placements because the thank you notes all come in from all the other candidates. And then they say, oh, so-and-so never sent us a thank you note. And then I have to say, well, there's a handwritten one coming. Okay. So, you just be very aware of that. And then the other question that is always good to ask to wrap up, if you get prompted a question and you're like kind of lost on, like you lose your track or something, just at the end of the interview, you can ask like, hey, what is the culture of the company, and how do you become successful? What are the keys to being successful in your company? Now that's a real softball question, but it's one you can pull out of the hat at the last minute, and it's asking a question, but you're also learning at the same time.
Or even something like, what are your next steps? There's just like anything that you can learn about what their process is and what to expect, or, but have a couple things ready.
So I know there are always opportunists out there, and this is unfortunately one of those times. Bob, what's your thought on recruiters reaching out to offer their services to candidates, and should that be something that they consider?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's 2 different kinds of recruiters. There's contingency recruiters and retained recruiters. Recruiters are not your friend in a job search, okay? Their job is to fill the role. And, that doesn't, I'm not trying to paint, I try to be, I try to be as helpful as possible with everybody. But at the end of the day, if my company has an opening, I need to find them candidates. And like my goal as a recruiter is to get you an interview. And once I get you the interview, your goal is to run with the ball across the finish line. And after that, that's where my job starts and ends, and I can advocate to a certain degree. I have my own family members. Oh, I'm going to hire a recruiter. I'm going to bring well, what do you mean by hire? Number one, never pay a recruiter anything. That's a fraud. And secondly, definitely network with recruiters and be on their radar. And, they will put you in front of their candidate, in front of their searches, if you're the right candidate. And, but don't depend on recruiters to get you there. And the other thing is, there's a big difference now between external recruiters and internal recruiters. And understand, internal recruiter actually works for the company, and their best interest is only with the company, and that's it. And external recruiter, my goal is to make sure that if Erica doesn't get this job, that I'm able to place Erica or Julie in another job. So I'm going to be very aware of making sure that I represent them to the best of my ability, make sure that they get, an accurate a chance to get the job, but also give them the right feedback, kind of coach them and do all of that, because I'm looking at it like, well, if we don't get this job, there's going to be another job. I don't know if I have answered the question, but
You did answer the question, but you were a little too harsh on yourself because you have placed me at 2 companies and we are friends.
no,
So-
no, well,
So you can become friends with your recruiter. Bob always works hard on your behalf. So I just want to make sure that folks know that while all recruiters are not the same, Bob has been a great advocate for communicators for many years. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to reach out to him. I think we have time for one more question, and I want to make sure I give all of our panelists time to offer their thoughts on this since we've touched on it a little bit. AI, this is more of a future-looking question, but do you think AI is going to replace us all? Let's start with you, Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this personally in my own job. I don't. I think what we all should be doing is learning and embracing AI. I've started doing it. It's incredibly helpful, but there's always going to be a need for somebody to actually communicate. There's always going to need somebody to understand the information, to put in what they want from AI. It may make your job more efficient. It may reduce some roles, but at the end of the day, think of it right now as your friend and as a tool. I don't know what the world's going to look like in 10 years, but we're not about 10 years right now. We're about right now. And I think the more savvy you are with AI, the more helpful it could actually be to you. So don't fear it, learn how to use it and embrace it.
Julie?
So I'm probably the lowest tech person on this call in the audience and on speakers. I believe, at least at this moment in time and for some time to come, AI cannot replace human judgment. We still need decisions made and information analyzed in a way that a machine can't do. So there's that piece, the human piece, in whatever industry sector, whatever kind of information needs to be acted upon. The judgment piece is still very much a human, I think, function. In jobs that, in any job, we all are going to have to use AI. I mean, I've gone into it somewhat reluctantly, I must say, but we do have Chat GPT and we have Copilot at work and so on. And I actually was blown away the first time I used Chat GPT. And I spent hours looking for something by Googling it that I knew I would find, and I didn't. And within less than 60 seconds, Chat GPT had it for me. It was amazing. So I would say be open to it. It's inevitable. We all have to use it. It will create, and it is creating efficiencies, things that you have done in the past that took forever and ever and ever, like profiling a journalist or who wrote what publication, or some of you probably have profiled advisory committee members to see what they've said about this, that, the other. It can be so efficient, and there's things technology does better than humans. So I think when you look for your jobs, and if you get an interview, you definitely want to communicate your willingness, or even better, your excitement to using it. Don't be afraid of it. Like Virginia said, don't fear it. We all have to do it.
so from a job perspective, job hunting perspective, it is 100% changing the landscape, 100%. So yes, it is replacing, we've got to learn how to navigate it. So if the question is from a communication standpoint and working on your internal teams, that's a different question. But when it comes to looking for a job, AI is changing everything. And it's in process right now. And I don't know the answers. I don't have the answers because I'm trying to navigate it too. And so, yes, it is changing things.
So I'll leave you with, it's here to stay. It's a tool, but it won't replace us. So, use it wisely and responsibly, but use it because it's going to be a way of life for how we do our jobs going forward. I want to thank Julie, Bob, and Virginia, and of course the Alumni Association for allowing us to have this conversation with one another and to answer the questions you have. As I said earlier, please feel free to reach out to us, use our networks, and I wish you all the best of luck with your searches. Elisa, do you want to have any?
Thank you. How's that?
Good.
Yes,
Thanks,
good luck.
everyone.
And thank you all for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Wishing you the best.
Yeah.
You're going to find a job.
You will.
Don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Erica. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Yeah.
you.